Every thumbnail on this channel and a lot of the images you see inside the videos was generated for free offline on my own graphics card sitting under my desk. No website, no monthly plan, no per image fee, no upload to anyone else's server. I type a description, my own machine thinks about it for a couple of minutes, and an image comes out the other side. And once you have that running, the whole way you think about images changes, because suddenly making one more costs you nothing but a little time. In this video, I want to walk you through exactly how I do that, what the workflow actually looks like in plain words, how slow it really is on the older card I am running, and just as importantly, where it falls short and a paid service still wins. No hype, just the real picture of generating images on your own hardware. Why I bother doing this on my own machine. Let me start with why I do this locally at all. Because most people just open a website, type a prompt, and get an image in seconds. That is genuinely easier, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But there are 3 reasons I keep the image generation on my own card, and they all matter to the way I work. The first is cost. I make a lot of videos, and every video needs a thumbnail and often several background images. If I paid a small fee for every single image and then regenerated each one 5 or 10 times to get it right, that adds up into a real bill over a year. On my own card, the marginal cost of one more image is basically the electricity, which is nothing I notice. The second reason is privacy. Nothing leaves the machine. The prompt, the image, all of it stays local, and for some of what I make that just feels right. I am not handing my ideas half-formed and ugly to someone else's server to keep. When I am working out a thumbnail concept, I might type 10 clumsy descriptions before one lands, and I like that those false starts simply vanish on my own drive instead of living in some account history forever. And the third reason, the one I underrated at first, is that I can iterate as much as I want. I will get into that more later, but being able to generate 50 variations without watching a meter tick is a different way of working entirely. When there is no cost and no quota, in the back of your mind, you stop being careful and start being playful. And playful is usually where the good results actually come from. What the workflow actually looks like. So let me make the workflow concrete. Because in plain words, it is simpler than people expect. There are really just 3 pieces. The first piece is a local image model, which is the big file that actually knows how to turn words into pictures. I run an open model in the SDXL family, which is one of the well-known image models you can download and run on your own machine. It is a few gigabytes, it lives on my drive, and once it is loaded, it never needs the internet again. That loading is worth a quick mention because the first time you run it, the model has to read itself into the card's memory. And that takes a moment. After that, image after image comes out without reloading, which is part of why running a batch is efficient. The second piece is the prompt, which is just a sentence or 2 of text describing the image I want. A calm desk at night lit by a single lamp, a clean abstract background in dark green, whatever the video needs. You do not need special syntax or magic words, you just describe the picture in your head as plainly as you can, and the clearer that description is, the closer the result lands. And the third piece is a small handful of settings that shape how the image comes out. That is genuinely the whole machine from the outside, a model, a prompt, a few dials, everything else you read about is detail layered on top of those 3 things. The few settings that actually matter. I want to spend a moment on those settings, because there are dozens of knobs and most of them you can ignore. Only a few really move the needle for me. The first is size, the width and height of the image. For a thumbnail, I generate at the wide shape a video player expects, so I am not stretching anything later. The second is steps, which is roughly how many passes the model takes to refine the image from noise into something clear. More steps can mean a little more detail, but it takes longer, and past a certain point you stop seeing any difference. So I sit at a sensible middle number. And the third is a guidance setting that controls how strictly the model sticks to my prompt versus how much freedom it takes. Too strict and the images get stiff and ugly, too loose and they ignore what I asked for. Once I found values that work for my style, I mostly leave them alone and just change the prompt. That is the honest truth of it. The prompt does almost all the work, and the settings are something you tune once and forget. How slow it really is on an older card. Now let me be straight about speed, because this is where doing it locally costs you something real. The card I run is not new. It is several years old, and it was a strong card in its day, but it is well behind what you can buy now. On a fast cloud service, you type a prompt and an image appears in a few seconds. On my machine, one image takes more like 1 to 2 minutes, depending on the size and the number of steps. That is not seconds. If I am generating a batch of 10 variations, I am waiting a chunk of time, not getting an instant grid. So I will not pretend it is fast, because it is not. But here is why it is usually fine for me anyway. I am almost never sitting there waiting on a single image in a panic. I queue up a batch, go do something else like writing the next script or editing audio, and come back to a folder full of options. When the work is free and runs in the background, a couple of minutes per image stops mattering. It only stings if you need one specific image right now and you are blocked until it finishes. For my actual workflow, that almost never happens. There is also a small trick that helps a lot here, which is that I can ask the card to make several images in one go rather than one at a time. And because the model is already loaded into memory, each extra image in that batch is a little cheaper than running it cold. So overnight, or while I am off doing something else, the machine can quietly grind through a long list of options and have them waiting for me in the morning. Once you stop thinking of image generation as a thing you sit and watch and start thinking of it as a thing you queue, the slowness mostly disappears as a problem. It becomes a background chore the computer does on its own time instead of mine. Although getting results that are actually good. So how do I get images that are actually usable and not the warped nonsense that local generation is famous for? This took practice, and there are really 3 habits that carry most of the result. The first habit is writing a clear prompt. Vague prompts give vague images. Instead of asking for a nice background, I describe the scene plainly, the subject, the lighting, the mood, the rough style, in a sentence or 2. The more concretely I picture it in words, the closer the first batch lands. The second habit, and this is the big one, is generating several and picking the best. I almost never use the first image. I generate a handful from the same prompt, each one a little different, and I choose the one that works. This is exactly where running locally pays off, because generating 8 more options cost me nothing, so I am free to be picky in a way I would not be if every attempt had a price on it. The third habit is fixing a good image with another pass instead of starting over. If an image is mostly right but one area is messy, I can run it through the model again to clean up just that part, or upscale it to a sharper version. So the loop is simple. Write a clear prompt, generate several, pick the best, and do one more pass to tidy it up. Nothing clever, just patience and a lot of cheap attempts. I should be honest that even with all of that, local generation still gets things wrong in ways that are sometimes funny and sometimes just useless. Hands come out strange, text inside an image is almost always garbled. A face will land in an uncanny place between real and wrong. I have learned to simply not ask it for the things it is bad at and to lean on it hard for the things it is good at. That acceptance is part of the skill too. You are not fighting the model to do everything, you are steering it toward the work it does well and quietly doing the rest another way, where a paid service still wins. Now I want to be fair, because there are real cases where I would tell you to just use a cloud service instead, and I mean that. The first is speed, plainly. If you need images right now, one after another, and you do not want to wait minutes each, a fast hosted service will run circles around my old card. For someone doing this under deadline pressure all day, that speed is worth paying for. The second is the very newest models. The best image models in the world are often only available through a paid service first, because they are too big or too new to run at home easily. Those services genuinely produce some things my local setup cannot match yet, especially clean text inside an image and very complex scenes. I'm not going to sit here and tell you a tool I do not pay for beats one that costs money on every axis, because that would not be honest. Local generation wins on cost and privacy and freedom to iterate. A good paid service wins on raw speed and on having the latest and largest models. Which one is right for you honestly depends on which of those things you care about most. What I actually use it for. So let me ground all of this in what I really make with it, because it is more modest than the flashy demos you have seen. The main thing is thumbnails. Every video on this channel needs one, and I generate the backgrounds and a lot of the imagery for them right here on my own card. It lets me try a dozen directions for a thumbnail cheaply and pick the one that reads best at a small size. The second thing is simple background images for the B-roll in my videos, the kind of soft abstract backdrop that sits behind a title or fills a moment where stock footage would feel wrong. Those do not need to be masterpieces, they need to fit the mood and not distract, and a local model is perfect for that. There is also a quieter benefit to keeping it all in one place. Because the images come off my own machine, they drop straight into the same folders my video pipeline already reads from. So a thumbnail or a background I just made is one step away from being in the actual video. There is no downloading, no re-importing, no account to log into. It is just a file on my drive that the rest of my setup already knows how to find. That tight loop is a bigger deal than it sounds when you are making a video most days. What I do not use it for is anything that needs to be pixel perfect or photoreal or full of precise text, because that is exactly where it still struggles and where I would reach for something else or just do it by hand. A client logo, a real product shot, a screenshot that has to be accurate, none of that is a job for a generated image, and pretending otherwise just makes things look fake. Knowing what a tool is genuinely good at is half the skill. I lean on local generation for the high volume, good enough, iterate till it fits work, and I do not ask it to do the things it cannot. So that is the whole picture of generating images locally on my own card. An open model in the SDXL family living on my drive, a plain text prompt doing most of the work, a few settings I tuned once and left alone, and a patient loop of generate several and pick the best. It is slower than a fast cloud service, minutes instead of seconds on my older hardware, and the very newest and largest models still live behind a paid service. But it costs me nothing per image, it stays completely private, and it lets me iterate as much as I want, which for the volume of thumbnails and backgrounds I churn through is exactly the trade-off I want. None of this is magic, and I am not overstating the quality. It is a practical setup that earns its keep. If you want more grounded, hands-on breakdowns of running this kind of thing on your own hardware with the real limits included and none of the hype, subscribe and follow along. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.